Today, we are going to talk about the analysis from your task 1, 2, and 3. I think today it's not going to be a long lecture because actually it's part of your analysis and it is used for your final task. You have analyzed and present to Punuvi and I about history of architecture since 0 until 1900 Coming era, and I would like to give a brief or a glimpse or a summary actually about what you have been analyzing. I took this diagram from a book by Roth L. and Clark A. The title is Understanding Architecture. So they try to summarize the historical event of architecture development throughout the world. And it started from 3000 BCE or before Common Era, where the prehistoric using this kind of stone, this is Stonehenge in Bath, United Kingdom, and pyramid. It's kind of the prehistoric or the first architecture imprint in our world, and then it develops through ancient Far East, Greek, Minoan, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian, and then it travels around time and changes, and then you studied it from the 0 until 1900s Common Era on based on several kind of background such as Han China dynasty, Tang China dynasty, and then late imperial Far East, as you can see here, until it developed like the modern at the moment. I don't want to talk about the characteristic of each part of this because what I'm going to discuss is about the methodology that you've been using. You probably wondered why are you being grouped in such groups and then you analyze each part of the history. Actually, this kind of analysis is explained by Michael Foucault. He is a philosopher and archaeologist. He mentioned that actually the study about history is reconstituting not large periods or centuries, but phenomena of rupture or discontinuity. That's why we have given you assignment to understand each part or each segment of the history, not like all big history. From there, you can reveal how any given periods about several past. It means that each part of your analysis will reveal several past. It means it only several history means that the background, the context, the political, the social context, and then the political context. It's only several past, not all the past, like as you can see in this image. This is the period. Usually, historian studied it back then before Michael Foucault's theory. They studied it in this kind of way. They studied why they changed from prehistoric, ancient Far East, Tang China, late imperial Far East, and not understanding each segment so that the analysis is just because of the cultural. Meanwhile, we are talking about architectural type, architectural language, so it is best for us to analyze it in a segment. And then from that, we continue. You can also reveal several forms of connection, several hierarchies of importance, several networks of determination, and several teleologies. So there, for one and the same science, as its presence undergoes change. So that's why we try to make you understand each part of it first, and then you try to build up your understanding, your own understanding about history of architecture. History is not only about um, history, a record or a living record, but it is the place you seek knowledge or experience about architecture. It's a reference for you to move forward to the next design. And historical descriptions are necessarily ordered by the present state of knowledge. That's why I ask you to analyze based on your knowledge. You don't have to tell us the story, the background. We don't need that. We need how the background relates to your knowledge, your understanding about the architecture that you see at the moment based on your knowledge, and then increased with every transformation and never cease. It means that why an architecture, one architecture to another architecture changes, you can explain it and how the elements is formed. That's why we ask you that part again and again in each of your tasks. We never ask you to tell us or to retell us the story of the building, but we ask you to analyze the building based on your knowledge so that we know, or you know, not or actually, and you know, you understand the transformation so that it break with themselves. It is the mixed sense of how a period's very approach to key terms and affect that period's understanding of itself and its story. I hope by explaining about the Michael Foucault's theory about about studying history, and it's actually about archaeology, but I think this is the best way to understand and more make history of architecture more interesting and more understandable for students. So that we try to adopt this kind of methodology to be applied to you so that you can gain more knowledge rather than just following the class. So it's an active process for you. And if you ask that part, I find that there are several students or groups who get lost in the way. Like you don't know where to start and how to start. Actually, we came back to Vitruvius. When we do analyze something, it is impossible for us to not use any theory at all. We must use theory or basis or basic foundation to build up our framework and then move forward to the analysis. And for this part, I prefer to use Vitruvian theory. Why? Because Vitruvian theory is existed in the area or in the period where the architecture exists. Your architecture, sorry, not your architecture actually, the architecture that you analyze on history class is actually on 0 until 900 CE, where actually no other knowledge about architecture rather than just Vitruvius. So it is good for you to start from there. And as architecture students, I think that you are already very feeling comfortable and familiar with the term of venustas, firmitas, and utilitas. Marcus Vitruvius said in De Architectura in 25 before Common Era about the aspects of buildings, which is strength, utility, and grace. Yeah, this is the three of it. It must be so when you ask about what is good architecture on the area between 0 until 1900, you can refer to Vitruvian theory. But if you nowadays ask about what is good architecture and then you refer to Vitruvian theory, it doesn't make any sense because the discourse of architecture is already expanded, and it's not only about the three of it, there are more, and there are more theories about architecture. So we are going to talk about it and try to revert it for the analysis based on your task 1, 2, and 3. The first is utilitas. Utilitas here, I think you heard that utilitas is about utility. Yes, but in this book that I've read about understanding architecture, utilitas can be assumed as a building function. When you analyze buildings from task 1, task 2, and task 3, you kind of feel like you find some type of some kind of typology. Meanwhile, nowadays, or monotypology or monofunctional typology is does it it's not exist anymore. But back then, you kind of feel like you find that kind of typology thing. For example, worship place like church, mosque, temple, and then public entertainment, and then also administrative, and then special resident like castle, and so on. These are some of typology that you can find based on task 1, task 2, and task 3. And what is actually make this function? What is the background why this function exists? So the why is actually about social or political context. If you try to remember whether in China, America and Europe, or India, the building, for example, the worship place, is because of the social or political context about Christianity, about the Islam, about Hindu, Buddha. Those kind of social or political context determine the function of the building. That's why I ask you to understand what is the social or political context or forces, so that you understand why the building exists. Why is the function of the building is that? And you can find also modification or adjustment or adaptation from one function to another function. It is also because of the context. So how many type it will the building will develop. It can be modified, it can be adjusted, it can be adapted, or it's just having changes on the function. But it's also because of the context. You need to understand the social and political context because of that. And then the function itself will help you to understand what kind of human experience you want to express in design. So in your cases is after understanding the function of the building and you can understand the context, you can frame out the human experience that you want to that I mean not you, I mean the architect, the architect of the building want to provide in the building. Now, if we talk about human experience, then we are going to talk about phenistas, which is delight. And some lecturer will say phenistas is about beauty or aesthetic. But to try to understand architecture, I think it is better for us to refer to about phenistas to be delight. It means how we see architecture. It is related to human experience, like I said before, and what actually affected, what is affecting it. It's actually caused by the visual and spatial perception, don't you think? Visual and spatial perception affect the human experience. For example, proximity. If you want to try to deliver proximity, you can find the pattern here, like the size of the dots. There is big, there is smaller one, and how you arrange, for example, the proximity from this dot to this dot to this dot is different with the proximity of this dot and this dot and this dot and this dot. And you can find this type of proximity based on the plan that you have got, and then the elevation, the section, and so on. Find the proximity. And then repetition. It is easy to find repetition in all your buildings. How it repeat the same pattern again and again. And then continuity and closure. For example, this one. it is empty, so you can find that this is a space that is empty, and you can find a closure, and this is continuity. It's just a concept. And then proportion, and then scale affect the human experience. Why? Because, for example, you have the high ceiling compared to the low ceiling. Which one is more comfortable for you to be your house? It's not about environmental, I mean. um, Another example is most of buildings who try to impress the inhabitant, for example, church, castle, or mosque, usually use dramatic scale. Dramatic scale means that humans feel very small in the church because of the ceiling is very high. Meanwhile, you compares to the domestic building, they have like a lower ceiling so that you kind of feel comfortable inside the domestic building. That's how you use scale in human perception. And then rhythm, try to find the rhythm. And then texture. Texture can be from the materials, texture can be from the finishings. So texture is also representing the environment at that day and where is it located. Light also provide important roles in analyzing buildings, how they try to provide daylighting into the buildings. It means that you can try to find or try to analyze the openings based on the elevation or section or even based on the plans. And then color, what color they are using. Is it warm? Is it cool? It can be from the material, it can be from the finish of the building. And then the last one is ornament. The ornament each time will represent the idea of that time as well. So these aspects, like from proximity, repetition, continuity and closure, proportion, scale, rhythm, texture, light, color, and ornament, helps you to identify what kind of human experience the architecture want to give. So that's why it is important to analyze this all. And then the last one is about firmness, the structure, or how does the building stand up. Why is it important? Because structure is actually affected by the technology development or material availability. That's why the forces that I'm talking to you during the task 1, 2, and 3 is about forces like social, human experience, and technology. And also, I forgot to mention the environment forces as well, because it relates to the material availability. That's why the technology affected the structure at that moment. It starts from the elements of the oldest architecture. Back then, people just used rammed earth to build their buildings like this. And then the technology and knowledge development brings post and lintel. It is the first type of beam and column technology. You can find it in Pharaoh, like Temple Pharaoh in Greek. You can find that. Oh, sorry, in Egypt. Sorry, Temple of Pharaoh. Those kind of building has a very dark kind of atmosphere because of the column size. The post or the column size is quite big, so that the space around is a bit small and dark. And then after that, um, they try to improvise or develop new type of column. So you can find the classical orders. Even the classical orders has their own development from the Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and then Tuscan Doric, and then Composite. And then after that, they develop the arc. After understanding the arc, they try to make fold like this. This is barrel fold. This is the fold that you can find in several type of buildings. And then after that, they develop dough. Now we are going to go to exercise. So I've already made a sheet, a Google sheet for you, not several Google sheets for you to analyze all task 1 until task 3 based on your analysis. And it's an individual task. The table is like this. I will share the link here. You can access it here. You will be divided into 13 analysis groups, and each student must fill in the blank according to task 1, 2, and 3 before 12:30 today as attendance proof. Each aspect, like this, for example, function, proximity, repetition, continuity, and closure, must not contain more than 5 words. So all of this, I have divided so that all of you must fill this blank. This analysis will help you to develop your essay or your paper, actually, your final assignment, because this analysis is used for the individual task. This is the individual task. You must submit a paper, and we have provided the format of the paper. So there will be title of the paper, and it's limited to 100 characters, and then your student name, student ID, and there's abstract, introduction, and so on, and you can find it all in the classroom. I will upload it. And don't forget that you can add image, you can add table, not only just based on the table that you have done in the Google Sheets, but you can make it your own, but based on the data. It's fine, and I think it's pretty much really good for you to because that kind of activity expresses or illustrate your understanding about the subject. And then this is how you work. So I have divided the class into 13 group so that each student will be assessed their understanding about the subject. So even though you present, so if you did wrong in the table, it means that your analysis could be wrong, your paper could be wrong. So please be responsible for filling in the sheets. So here, for example, like this. Group DA01 will be consisted of Khairul Bahrum, Hatije, and Muhammad Bintang Nabilun Nuha. For that part, Khairul Bahrum will be responsible for Europe and America 0 until 600 CE, and then also China and Japan 1600 until 1900 CE, and 800 until 1400 CE, and so on and so on. So this is, you can see here, and in the drive that I have given you, I have provided different links. So you must go to that link based on the group here. Unfortunately for TJ, I think you must go to 2 groups because you've been moved to new group for task 3. So TJ will, for task 3, you will fill the blank in group DA13, I guess. Here, here. Sorry, here. TJ. I will upload all the materials in the classroom, and you can start to draft your works if you have finished filling the gap of in the table. That's it for today, and you can drop message if you want to ask me in the WhatsApp group. See you next week.